Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Monday, February 19th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game in 194 days, the game against Michigan in 285 days. Hopefully you get to enjoy a little bit of a long holiday weekend on this President's Day. Ohio State athletics fans overall probably hoping the weekend really never comes to an end. Let's just run through just a few of the highlights. I think I saw something from Ohio State President Ted Carter that all 15 Ohio State teams that were in action on Saturday won. That's pretty remarkable. Here's a few of the highlights. Women's hockey swept a weekend series to win the WCHA regular season title. Men's hockey, who has not had a great season, swept number 4 Wisconsin. Won both games, like an actual sweep. Number 4 Wisconsin. Men's tennis advanced to the indoor national championships with a 4-0 sweep over Virginia in the semifinals. They will play number 2 TCU in the finals. And oh yes, remember the Ohio State basketball team that everyone, myself included, had completely written off like 5 days ago, and then they fired their coach, and it was like, well, this is going poorly. Ohio State 73, number 2 Purdue 69, final score in men's basketball in the Schottenstein Center on Sunday. I was there for it. Kevin Noon is there for it. Kevin Noon is here with me now to talk about it. Kevin, the Jake Diebler era at Ohio State, I guess it's off to a good start so far.
Yeah, 1-0, and it was a big one. Remember, Purdue came in as the number 2 team in the nation. Obviously, Purdue has kind of farted around in its last 4 games, and I talked to a Purdue writer before the game. He's like, well, Ohio State's guard play is going to be an issue and some other things, and I'm like, you're just being nice. You're being nice. You're in our building, and you just want to sound like you're just part of the crowd or whatever, but fine, you can say. But Ohio State goes out there and takes care of business, and it wasn't without its drama. Ohio State had to fight to come back in the game, kind of got right up to the cusp, couldn't break through. Ohio State builds a big lead, not an 18-point lead, because we know that that's danger. That's like 28-3 in the NFL. You don't want to do that. And ends up seeing the game get tied up late, and then hits some big baskets down the stretch and gets away with the win. And Ohio State's going to have to address another 900-pound monster in the room with going on the road to Minnesota next. But these guys came out and played their tails off and got the win that Ohio State has been very elusive for the Buckeyes as of late.
Yeah, I mean, any wins have been pretty elusive for Ohio State as of late. To win a game like this against the number 2 team in the country, really kind of out of nowhere. I mean, you mentioned the crowd earlier, being part of the crowd. That was about as lively as I have heard the Schottenstein Center in a long time. And part of it, I think, was the fact that there were thousands of Purdue fans there. Purdue was very well represented. There were some very loud, very clearly audible pro-Purdue chants during the course of the game. But man, when Ohio State got it rolling and they built a 12-point lead in the second half, Jamison Battle hit a couple threes back to back, and it got loud, it got lively in that building. And then there was some back and forth between the fans, and it was, for as often as that building has been, a slightly livelier version of a morgue over the last few years, that was quite an atmosphere in there on Saturday or Sunday.
Yeah, according to the final book, attendance was over 18,000. Maybe, probably not, but there were a lot of butts in seats. The upper tank had a good amount of people, especially center court. The ends, maybe not as much, but I heard several boiler up chants. There were thousands of Purdue fans. During the introductions, the cheers for Purdue were maybe not quite as loud as the cheers for Ohio State, but they registered. They were significant. You mentioned Jamison Battle. He really got hot when it was necessary. Bruce Thornton carried the water most of the way, but Jamison Battle had 3 threes in 61 seconds. And Ohio State needed all of those. And, it was not a game where Roddy Gale was able to really get into it, but Ohio State getting whatever was 41, 43 points between the 2 main players. That's what Ohio State needs. I've talked about it in other basketball shows, and we don't do a ton of them because we go where the fans are, and there's not been a ton of demand over what Ohio State has been this year. But you need to have that second score, and maybe the third score was not somebody who got into double figures, But when you have guys playing like Battle and Thornton, who are the players we talked to after the game, that means a lot. And Ohio State did a lot of the things that played into maybe some of the cracks in the Purdue armor.
Yeah, you go through the box score and there's a bunch of, boy, I can't believe, if I told you that this one stat, you would think this team won by 20 points. Or if I told you that one stat, you'd think, oh, the other team won by 20 points. And it ended up being an incredibly close game with just a bizarre series of stats. Purdue, 20 for 20 at the line, 20 for 20 at the free throw stripe. Zach Edey, 22 points, 13 boards. It felt like he didn't have a great game. He had 6 turnovers, and you look at the final stats, and it's 22 points and 13 boards, and it's like, oh well, I guess he played just fine. 22 points for Bruce Thornton, 19 for Jamison Battle. If I told you Roddy Gale scores 4 points, you're thinking there's no way Ohio State wins that game. If I tell you Ohio State led 26-4 in bench points, okay, now you're probably thinking Ohio State probably won by a bunch. Ohio State 22 points off of turnovers, Purdue just 5. Just a weird game. Ohio State, both teams shot 33% from three-point land. Ohio State just 7 for 21 from 3. That's not a very good game. Purdue was okay. Purdue had an advantage in the paint, 32-24. But, when you have a Zach Edey out there and Ohio State was just kind of like rotating guys through, I think they had about 4 different guys on him at various times. It just felt like they were just kind of throwing stuff up against the wall, and it's okay. It's Zed Key for a while, and then it's Felix Okpara, and then he fouls out. And, I saw Evan Mahaffey was kind of on him at one point, and they even brought in Austin Parks at one point. I mean, it was just kind of throwing stuff up against the wall to see what worked, and it just kind of worked.
Yeah, credit to Zed Key. Zed Key had maybe his best defensive game ever as a Buckeye. Very active hands, was able to swat the ball out of Zach Edey's hands multiple times. Early in the game, they were forcing these turnovers, but they weren't able to get them, and Purdue was able to maintain possession, but it just kind of continued on, and I think it kind of got into Edey's hands. Edey only had a couple of attempts in the first half, and Purdue was like, oh, gee, we have Zach Edey. We should probably throw it down to him more, and they had much more success in the second half, but Ohio State had already planted the seed of being able to, anytime that Edey brought the ball below his waist, it was not ever going back up. Ohio State was able to knock it away and just really rattle him a lot. Ohio State's turnovers that it was able to force. I mean, Ohio State, what was it? It was like 14-6 in the turnovers, maybe even worse than that. That was something Matt Painter talked about after the game, and he was like, that was a huge difference right there. Ohio State just played at a high level there, and Purdue's record when it is losing the turnover battle is very mortal. And, Purdue, when it wins a turnover battle, is among the best teams in the nation. So you look at all those types of things. Ohio State was really able to weather multiple storms. As I mentioned earlier in the show, Purdue marches all the way back, ties the game late, and then the Buckeyes are able to pull away. And that's not something that we've seen earlier. And, of course, they're going to be the people who look to find a person to blame. I need to find somebody to blame because obviously it's somebody's fault, and they're all going to blame Chris Holtmann. This is the team that was there all along. I just think all the pieces really worked well today. And, Purdue's a bad matchup for the Buckeyes. Purdue has been a bad matchup for years just because of Matt Painter's success of recruiting bigs. I mean, they have Zach Edey. They have a redhead that's a redshirt freshman that's like 7'2". Oh, by the way, they're bringing in a 7'4" player to start the whole cycle over again. Ohio State has always been a smaller team. You mentioned Felix Okpara fouls out. Zed Key played with 4 fouls. They had a point where they had neither of them on the court because Okpara was out and they were trying to save Key, and they still managed to find a way. This is going to be the game that a lot of people are going to circle and say, the pieces are there. Whoever the next coach is going to be has pieces as long as he can hold on to these guys.
Well, before we get to the next coach, let's talk about the current coach, the new coach, the interim coach, Jake Diebler. This was his first game as Ohio State's interim head coach, and that's quite a first impression. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. Jake Diebler made quite a first impression on Sunday. So, what did he have to say after the game? I would imagine it was something of a day of mixed emotions for him.
Yeah, he went through the handshake line and he's like, I'm getting emotional. I'm getting emotional. Then his wife gets down there. Then his parents get down there. And he's like, yeah, I lost a little bit. I'm not going to let you guys make me emotional down here. So he managed to keep us at bay because the evil beat media going to try and make coach cry or whatever. But, he asked a lot of the team and they were able to get out there and perform. And there were a lot of things that they said after the game that, he didn't want to share, and that's fine. What happens in the locker room kind of stays in the locker room. But there was a lot that led to this moment. And he said that he had a really good conversation with Chris Holtmann kind of leading up to the game, not today or anything like that, but leading up to the game. And, the pieces are there. That is probably the most confounding thing about this Ohio State team is you look at the pieces that they have. You look at Bruce Thornton, you look at Jamison Battle, you look at Roddy Gale, but for whatever reason, they've not been able to kind of get over that hump. And today it just all clicked. Ohio State was able to counterpunch every time that Purdue went on the offense. I brought up my shot sheet as we were talking. With a minute 38, they tied it up at 65 all, and then Ohio State goes on and leads the game, whatever it is, 8-4 to win it out. Battle making a big bank shot and then hitting a couple shots at the line. Thornton makes it to the line and hits a couple shots, and then Battle finishes it off. And for everything about Purdue going 20 for 20 at the line, Ohio State was not 100%. Ohio State did not go to the line nearly as much as Purdue. But those are the shots that we've seen Ohio State miss in previous games. And you can't blow an 18-point lead if you never lead by 18. Ohio State never led by 18, so we're not talking about that.
Exactly. Life hacks, never build too big of a lead. Not exactly conventional wisdom with a basketball team, but it worked out for Jake Diebler. And Diebler, according to ESPN stats information, the second head coach since 1996-97 to beat an AP top 10 team in their Division I coaching debut. I thought it was very interesting. Matt Painter, the Purdue coach, after the game was asked about, what did they do differently? How was this different from a Chris Holtmann team? And I thought his answer was really interesting.
Yeah, he said if Chris Holtmann was a coach, Ohio State would have won this game 73-69. That they didn't go out there and do anything different. They, didn't morph into something that they weren't, that they just went out and played their game. And, I think he was very complimentary of Chris Holtmann. We certainly heard some things from Tom Izzo, Michigan State head coach, about the circumstances of Ohio State moving on. And while Matt Painter didn't come out and wasn't asked a question to lead into it directly that way, he wasn't going to sit there and say that Ohio State suddenly decided that it was going to run a 1-3-1 zone or something like that and just completely change up how it went about doing business or anything like that. This was an Ohio State team that was dangerous to begin with. And that sometimes after a move like that, a team over the next 5 days is going to maybe have a little bit more juice or a little bit more energy. But he went through all the stats the way you did. And, Purdue had some moments of where it had, favorable stat matchups, and Ohio State certainly had its favorable matchups. But, he wasn't going to sit there and say that Jake Diebler necessarily, solved an enigma. And that's not taking anything away from Jake Diebler. That's just saying this is the Ohio State team that they saw on tape.
And I saw some people online after the game saying, don't just give him the job now because he won one game. And I don't think anyone is necessarily, racing out to give Jake Diebler the job, the permanent job based on just one game. I think, you obviously, let's see what happens when they go on the road to Minnesota. If they win on the road to Minnesota, okay, they haven't done that since January 1st, 2023, when it went on the road against Big Ten Conference team. Let's see what happens there. Let's see what happens with the rest of the regular season. They've got 5 regular season games left. They're all winnable. The win at Michigan State is going to be probably dicey, but they're all winnable games. Let's see where it goes. I mean, what in your mind does Jake Diebler need to do moving forward to be at least a serious candidate. I think Ross Bjork's probably likely path is going to start with try to find a big name national coach. What would Jake Diebler, if he goes out and runs the table and they win the national championship, sure, it's his job. But I mean, there's probably something short of that would get him there. So, or at least get him to be a serious candidate. So what does that look like to you? What would he have to do moving forward to be a serious part of that conversation?
He has to win 4 or 5. He has to get Ohio State into the semis of the Big Ten tournament. If that's good enough to net Ohio State berth into the NC2A tournament, probably even still win a game at that point. If not, maybe win the whole damn NIT. I don't know, but there are going to be a lot of wins that need to happen at this point. You sit there and you ride this crest of emotion from this Purdue game. Let's see what happens at Minnesota. Let's see what happens at some of these other games. It's really easy to sit there and say, well, you won this game against number 2 at home, so therefore things are fixed. And you have the secret sauce, and we're going to move forward with there. I think it's really going to take at least 4 wins in the regular season, probably a couple of wins in the Big Ten tournament. And if you just really want to sit there and make stuff complicated, win one in the postseason. And if you're in the NIT, you're going to have to win at least 2 to 3 times that, because the NIT is the NIT, and it just is what it is. But, I don't think anybody should be thinking that Jake Diebler is measuring for the drapes right now. It's one game. That's all well and good, but you're going to have to win a lot more.
Yeah, and he will have an opportunity to win a lot more later on this week when they do go on the road to Minnesota. Then they're in Minnesota on Thursday, at East Lansing for Michigan State next Sunday, and then home for Nebraska this following Thursday, home for Michigan on the following Sunday, the March the 3rd, and then the regular season finale at Rutgers on Sunday, March 10th, and then after that, we'll see where it goes from there. But the Jake Diebler era off to a pretty darn good start, 73-69 for the Buckeyes over number 2 Purdue on Sunday. Hey, we're talking about basketball on this show. That's pretty notable in and of itself. So very good start to the Jake Diebler era. Very impressive win for the Buckeyes. Nice job by the crowd that turned out. That was again a very lively, energetic crowd. That was a Schottenstein Center that we have not seen all that often over the last few years. That was it was pretty fun to be in there and have a crowd going back and forth like that. So hopefully we get a few more of those in the coming weeks and coming years. So. Well, we will be talking basketball perhaps a little more in the coming days and coming weeks if the Buckeyes keep playing like that. And we'll certainly be talking football as well as we head into the spring football season. Buckeyes are ready to start that on the first Tuesday in March. So we are just over 2 weeks away. Goodness, pretty exciting. So we'll be there for all of that. We're going to have hopefully some coach interviews this week. That's the plan. So we get talking a good bit of football this week. Going to have Mark on to talk a little recruiting tomorrow. Going to have Ross on to talk a little bit of scheme and take a look at Michigan's new defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale, on Wednesday's show. Lots of interesting stuff coming for you this week on Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning, and lots of interesting stuff coming for you as well at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We hope to see you there. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.